Today, our forum, The Relevance of Liberal Arts in a High-Tech World, is brought to us with support of the law firm of Crabb, Brown, and James, represented by Larry James and his associates, the Columbus Foundation that you just heard from, and State Auto, represented by Joel Brown and his associates. Please join me in thanking our sponsors and welcome Joel Brown, Senior VP Standard Lines at State Auto Insurance, to the stage to introduce all of our speakers.
Thank you, Rich. It's my pleasure to represent State Auto Insurance as we support the mission of the Columbus Metropolitan Club to engage people and ideas in community conversation. All of us are attending CMC today, and we're fortunate that we have the opportunity to hear today, in one place, at one time, the leaders of three highly respected institutions of higher learning, institutions with rich histories and astounding records of alumni success. And all are deeply engaged in the evolution of higher education to meet the needs and challenges of the 21st century. Being a graduate of a liberal arts institution and having two of my sons attend liberal arts schools, one of those being Denison, I am thrilled to introduce, on behalf of CMC and State Auto Insurance, the president of Ohio Wesleyan University, Rock Jones, the president of Kenyon College, Sean Decatur, the president of Denison University, Adam Weinberg, and our host and moderator, the former president of Kenyon College, and currently the senior fellow at the Council of Independent Colleges, Georgia Nugent. Please help me welcome all of our speakers. Georgia, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Joel, and thanks to all of you for coming. What a terrific turnout. We're going to try and spend some time up here on questions that I think are probably on many people's minds, and then, of course, we'll open it up to some conversation and questions from the audience. The title that was given to our panel here, as you just heard, was The Relevance of Liberal Arts in a High-Tech World. And I think that may somehow implicitly assume that there's a kind of disconnect between liberal arts and technology. And I think those of us who are in the liberal arts environment would say that that's not really the case. So I'm going to start us out by turning to the godfather of high tech, Steve Jobs. And note, many of you may be familiar with this, that in the last public speech that Jobs gave, he famously said, "Technology alone is not enough. It's technology married with the liberal arts, married with humanities, that yields the results that make our hearts sing." And our phones ring, I guess. So, As I said, I think often there can be a kind of an assumption that tech and liberal arts don't necessarily have something in common or are somehow unrelated to one another. That's not the case. And before I turn to our panelists, let me say a word about what I've been doing and learning since stepping down from the Kenyon presidency. Because it's related to the fact that I think a lot of times there is a kind of misunderstanding about liberal arts colleges. So I'm currently the fellow at the Council of Independent Colleges, located in Washington, D.C. That's an organization of more than 600 small, private, liberal arts colleges. All of these colleges are members of the organization, and obviously many others. What my project is really to provide the public with reliable and accurate information about this kind of college. What I've learned is that there's a whole lot of misinformation or misunderstanding about liberal arts colleges, what they are and what they do. Just one example, science, the natural sciences, physics, chemistry, biology, have always been a part of liberal arts. But there are many people who assume that somehow liberal arts doesn't include science. I think the name of the colleges is our first problem. Liberal arts Often there's the assumption that it has to do with politics. It does not. Or that it has to do with something like CCAD. It does not. Right? So that's the whole point, in a way, of why we're here. There are, I think, on topics ranging from who attends these schools to cost, to indebtedness, to jobs, that much of the American public doesn't have the facts about with regard to this uniquely American form of higher education. And so we're going to touch on each of those topics in our conversation today. So let me turn to my fellow panelists and ask each of them to introduce themselves very briefly first. Sean?
Yeah. Thank you, Georgia. And first, thanks to the members of the Metropolitan Club and the leadership for putting together this program, which is very exciting. And thanks to Georgia and my colleagues, Rock and Adam, for joining in on this panel. I think one of the things that's been great about coming to the Central Ohio area and being part of the higher education community here is, in fact, having great colleagues at peer institutions. And I know the three of us are friends as well as colleagues, and there are moments of intense competition, especially on the soccer field and the pool, about which we won't discuss right now. But in general, it's wonderful to have colleagues that are committed to a common mission. And I've been at Kenyon for 2 years. Kenyon is a private liberal arts college just north of here in Knox County in Gambier, Ohio, a small town outside of Mount Vernon. Kenyon is a school of about 1,650 students on campus. We are 100% residential on-campus community, all undergraduate students. Our students come from around the country and around the world. We pride ourselves on having an extremely talented and extremely diverse population of students that we bring to Gambier. And one of the things which I've enjoyed about being a college president, when I think about what our job and what our mission is at Kenyon, it's really about personal transformation of students. And in a sense, I'm a chemist by training, and I still think of Kenyon College as very much a catalytic reactor where we bring talented students from around the country and around the world. We bring them to our campus up on a hill in Gambier. We combine them with a very talented faculty of teacher scholars. We combine them with talented peers from around the country. And
Sean,
by immersing them in a rigorous...
No commercials, Sean.
No commercials. But by giving them an exposure to a rigorous education grounded in the liberal arts, and that means an exposure to the humanities, the social sciences, the natural sciences. It means a commitment to communicating well, a commitment to solving problems analytically, and all done with a type of rigor, and I think a type of rigor and a type of commitment that you'd find at any of our institutions. We actually have folks who not only are successful in getting jobs after graduation, but they are engaged in their community as citizens, and they are committed to lifelong learning. And that combination of career success, success as citizens, and success as lifelong learners is I think, really a hallmark of what we look for in outcomes of a liberal education.
Okay, we're going to talk about how liberal arts is flexible, and I'm going to be flexible right now. We're going to go right to the conversation because Sean has done our entire program. Can you live with that? Okay. Let's start out with who goes to these colleges. And Rock, maybe if you'd start us out by talking a little bit about who are the liberal arts students.
Sure. Thank you, Georgia. And let me add my word of appreciation to the Metropolitan Club for the opportunity to have this conversation today. And I think that people are often surprised to learn that the students on our campuses come from a rich, diverse array of backgrounds. Each of our campuses recruits students from across the country and from around the world. We have students on our campus from more than 40 states and from more than 40 countries around the world. A quarter of the students on our campus qualify for Pell Grants, so they come from the lowest income families in our country. About an equal number are first-generation college students, and those numbers are reflective of the independent higher education sector across the country. More than a quarter of our students are students of color. Our campuses are very diverse, and I think each of our three campuses has engaged in significant initiatives in recent years to become even more diverse. One of the objectives on our campus is to build a global and diverse perspective among all of our students. an agenda that I'm sure is shared with the other campuses. And a part of the way we do that is to allow our students to be surrounded by peers from very diverse backgrounds. So in a first-year residence hall on our campus, or I would suspect on any of our campuses, it would not be unusual to find in a suite of 4 students, and I know I can student from the heart of Columbus, a student from rural Ohio, a student from California, and a student from Pakistan. And within those 4 students, and then you mix the suites along the corridor, we have a situation perhaps unique in American society, in the residential campus, the residential environment of a liberal arts institution, where we bring students literally from every perspective and every life experience and every background, both domestically and internationally. And it's out of that rich diversity of experience and perspective that we're able to build our student bodies and to create the learning environment that happens on our campuses.
Thanks. And you see the nodding going on, that's certainly the case at Denison and Kenyon as well. And this is one of those things that's maybe a little counterintuitive. Most folks don't know that the family income, for example, at flagship public state universities is typically higher than it is at small private liberal arts colleges. And that's partly because of the scholarship monies that we're able to provide and so forth. Adam, we know that cost is on everybody's mind, and parents out there are wondering, where can I afford to send my son or daughter? So what's the story about cost?
Yeah, so as somebody who has 2 kids in college, cost is something I think about every day. Let me just start off with an observation. It is, for anybody who's paying attention, it's clearly the most disruptive moment in higher ed since the end of World War II. But I think, like in any other sector, that disruption hits different kinds of colleges very differently. One of the great things about the current round of disruption is everybody's paying attention to cost. And actually for colleges like Denison, Kenyon, OWU, Worcester, Oberlin, that's great because actually we're becoming more affordable vis-a-vis the publics. Our discount rates have risen pretty significantly over the last couple of years. So I'll use Denison as an example. We have a large endowment. We didn't use that endowment to do things that don't benefit undergrads. We've used our endowment to solely focus on our students, and we've put most of it towards financial aid. So the average Denison student this year is paying $20,000 of tuition. That means if it takes 5 years to get through a public college, which for most public colleges, that's short, it's actually cheaper to go to Denison than it is to go to a large public. So for a lot of Ohio kids, Denison, Kenyon, OWU is going to be their most affordable option. Now, the kind of narrative out there is just the opposite. So what we have is not an affordability problem. What we have is a pricing problem. We need to do a better job of letting families know earlier in the admissions process that actually the privates are going to be much more generous with financial aid, have much higher discount rates, and over the long haul, they're going to graduate with less debt. The average Denison student is graduating with less than $25,000 of debt.
Let me just pick up on what Adam's saying. That's not just Denison. From my perspective of the 600 liberal arts colleges, that's the data. Typically, students are paying about $20,000 a year, and they're graduating with about $20,000 total in debt. And that's not what you're reading in the New York Times or, or in the media.
Right. Not that we believe much of anything we read in the press these days.
Press people out there? Before we turn more specifically to technology, which we definitely want to do, let me broaden the picture for a minute. We're representing up here 3 of Ohio's small private colleges, but there are more than 50 in the state of Ohio. And Sean, as a native Ohioan, I wondered if you'd say a word about what difference does that make to the state and to this community, the Columbus community?
I think that the private colleges, the small private colleges in Central Ohio region, I think in Ohio in general, are real jewels and important factors in economic development and social development in the state. We bring in students, I'd say about 85% of our students come from outside of the state of Ohio. So if you think of the young talent we're bringing into the state every year, many of those folks will participate in internships in the state and in the area. Some will actually find employment in the area. So you can think of our schools as being examples of institutions that are reversing the the loss of talent in the state, right? We are actually taking talented students from around the country, around the world, bringing them into Ohio, hopefully actually connecting them into the economy of Ohio. I'd say that we also are bringing jobs in the form of faculty positions, of other positions on our campus that help to contribute to the artistic, the intellectual, the research environment within the state as well. And so, the economic and intellectual and social impact of our institutions is significant.
Typically in a small town, as Kenyon is in a small town or near Mount Vernon, typically in a small town, the local college is, if not the most, among the most important economic engines in the area. And I know that's, when I was at Kenyon, I think we were second in Knox County or whatever. That's a very typical thing that you find. Two features of our environment today that I think are affecting everyone and everyone is thinking about quite a bit are the ubiquity of technology and global interconnectedness. And in fact, even those are kind of connected, right? So I want to turn to maybe first to Adam and Sean. Could you all, again, I think there's often a conception that there are MOOCs, those massive online courses at one end of the spectrum, and then there are the liberal arts colleges where people are working with chalk on a stone, and that's not really what's happening. So, in fact, there is a great deal of ferment and use of technologies, typically to extend what we do best, on the small campuses. So I know each of you has some great examples of the sort of thing that's going on. Adam, why don't I start with you?
I'll start by talking about the global, and then I'll let Sean kind of talk about some of the
Okay.
flipped classrooms and other things. Look, you can get a great education just about anywhere, but the value of a liberal arts college is the relationships and the mentoring, which you just can't get in most large places. Where technology is really intersecting with the liberal arts right now, partially is around just opening up global opportunities for our students to develop relationships and to learn how to form new relationships that's going to be crucial for their success in the world they're going to inherit. So I'll give you just one quick example. All of our schools now have sister colleges. We're part of a new alliance. We have sister colleges in 14 countries around the world. We're linked with an all-women's college in Saudi Arabia, college in Japan, Pakistan, Mexico, Ghana. There's a whole range of them. We now have courses on our campus that are linked to courses on our sister colleges' campuses, and our students are actually learning how to do real-time projects globally. So yesterday I was walking through our student union, and a student grabbed me. She's part of a class that's linked with our sister college in Switzerland. The students are using Google Hangouts. I have no idea what that is, but my kids tell me it's cool. They're using Google Hangout to do a joint project on Middle Eastern politics. Because, as Grant alluded to, our campus is global and their campus is global. You have students from the US, Switzerland, Jordan, and Brazil who have never met each other, all working jointly on a project that they have to present together. So not only are they getting global exposure, but they're learning what it's going to be like to work for an organization that's global, where you have to learn to work with people who you may never actually meet face to face. That's the kind of dynamic, interesting way that liberal arts colleges are using technology to give students the kind of skills they're going to need to be able to survive in the professions that they're going to inherit.
And as other examples I'd add to that, it's not only connecting with other students from around the world, but it's also bringing resources into the classroom, resources into the individual student experience, which at least from my perspective would have been unimaginable 30 or 40 years ago. So if you are a biology student now on any one of our campuses, you will in all likelihood be taking an introductory biology class where you're using databases and resources on genetic data, on protein structural data, which is being generated in research labs at real time. And not only then can you be a user of that data, but the students in our lab courses themselves can generate data that gets authenticated online by experts and then put into the larger part of the scientific knowledge base. And so, one of the things that I think is amazing about technology and higher education technology at our institutions is that it very much means that students can be active participants in the generation of new knowledge and information, especially in the STEM fields, that they can collaborate with professional scientists in ways that would have been unimaginable 30 or 40 years ago. And all of that really deepens the student learning experience. And the fact that it happens in a place where faculty mentors are closely involved in guiding, directing, giving feedback on this all along the way means that students not only get the experience, but they get the meaning of the experience, which is important.
Yeah.
George, I would just add that our students will live in a global society, they will work in a global economy, and our objective is to prepare them to be global citizens through the Global Liberal Arts Alliance, which Adam referenced. We were able to bring students and faculty together from 13 institutions here in the Midwest and the 14 partner institutions from around the world. 2 summers ago, we brought students and faculty together to discuss the topic of water, which is obviously a critically important issue. And this summer, we'll be bringing students together and faculty together to discuss issues related to public health. And then when the conference finishes, the conversation continues among individuals, among classes, between institutions because of the value of technology.
Yeah, this global alliance is really exciting. I know I was a part of that when it was starting out. Let me just quickly turn back to you again, Rock. Adam mentioned the skills that our students will need for jobs. What is the situation out there? I understand that every liberal arts graduate is now a barista. Is that correct?
Well, Dan Sharp, from whom you heard earlier, who's seated at the head table, is a graduate of Ohio Wesleyan. Each of our institutions is well represented today by individuals who are making enormous contributions to Central Ohio and to the Columbus community. We do know that students and their families, more than ever before, are concerned about what happens after college. Will I be able to attend graduate school? Will I have a job? We all collect data very carefully. I can give you Ohio Wesleyan's data, but I'm sure Kenyon and Denison have similar stories to tell. In November, we surveyed our students who had graduated in May. 97% of those who responded are either in graduate school or in full-time employment or in a full-time internship. And of those who are employed, 81% are employed in the field of their choice. Those are very high numbers. If you read the media on what we're being told about access to jobs, we know that it's important to prepare students for meaningful work when they graduate or when they complete their education. We do that in part, we call it the practical application of knowledge. All of us are placing much greater emphasis on internships, on service learning, on undergraduate research, on study travel, practicing the application of knowledge, giving students connections between classroom learning and practical real-world experience. But we also know that it's important not just for students to be job ready when they graduate, but for students to receive the capacities of a liberal arts education so that as knowledge expands and as technologies change, they will have the skills for lifelong learning, and it's with those skills that they will emerge, as so many in this room from our institutions have emerged, as leaders in American and in our global society. Those skills will allow them to work with knowledge that does not exist when they graduate from college. Those skills will allow them to learn the technologies that do not exist when they graduate from college. And in fact, we believe it's the capacities that accompany a liberal arts education, the capacities for critical and analytical thinking, the capacities as a strong communicator in written or oral form, the capacities for working with teams of people to explore complex problems from the perspectives of multiple disciplines in search of lasting solutions. It's the capacity to be empathetic and to understand people whose life experiences are very different from one's own. Those are the capacities that provide the foundation for lifelong learning that allow our graduates not just to be job ready when they graduate, but to be life ready so that, again, as knowledge expands and technologies change, they emerge as leaders.
Hey, Georgia, can I have one piece to that? I think Rock's absolutely right. I mean, look, the reality is the job market is tough. Parents and kids have a right and should be anxious about whether or not the college degree they're getting is going to be worth the investment. But the reality also is that the data is really clear from all of our schools that our students are getting jobs. Here's what's more important from my perspective. I think Rock's also right that it's easy to get a job. The hard part is getting a good job. And the skills that you need to get a good job are the skills we're teaching. But here's the third piece, the missing piece that Rock is too polite to mention, but I'll mention it. I was with an alum last week who works for a major investment house. They received 10,000 applications for their entry-level jobs. There's about 50 of them. They were able to whittle it from 10,000 to 2,000 pretty easily. But she was also really blunt. If somebody at that firm didn't go to your school, you're not going to get from the 2,000 to the 100 that are actually going to get interviewed. And the other thing that our colleges have done historically is we've produced generations of alums who have succeeded and who attribute that success to our colleges and remain connected to them and are just willing to do things for our students. On each of our campuses on a given night, you can come back and find alums on campus meeting with students. I mean, this sounds silly, but we have a student who's graduating this year who happens to have a passion for zoos and penguins. I don't know how, but she does. But, you know, it turns out that we do, as do all of these colleges, have alums who are connected to zoos. So we've been able to get her through alumni connections interviews with a number of zoos to get set up for entry-level jobs. So I just think there's a variety of things that liberal arts colleges bring to the table because of the mentorship, because of the skills, because we care about this issue, and because of the success of our alums historically, that just gives us a competitive advantage in an environment where people are asking tough questions about return on investment.
Absolutely, and again, I'll just amplify those data that Rock mentioned. That kind of number, 85 to 90% of liberal arts graduates gainfully and happily employed or continuing into a graduate program within 6 months of graduation. That's true of the 600 colleges that I'm affiliated with. I mean, those are the facts that are not what you're hearing so much. I know the tradition here is to open the floor to questions, and I'm going to do that in just a minute. So let me ask one final question of our panel first. And Adam, I think I'm going to start with you at least on this, but everyone feel free to chime in. What do you see in the future? You know, if I read the paper, I understand that all campuses are going to disappear and everybody will be just studying in their jammies at their laptop.
Well, I don't own jammies, so that's going to be a problem for me. But I'm assuming I can buy them in Easton on the way back, maybe? You know, look, I think you're going to see all the top national liberal arts colleges focusing on three things. One, we are going to continue to become more affordable vis-a-vis the publics. We're just going to use our endowments, our fundraising capacity to continue to raise our discount rates and to make our colleges more affordable. The second is you're going to see a huge focus on careers and career exploration. We are all pouring lots of money into helping students from their first day on our campuses do the things they need to do to be prepared for the professions. We're all putting money into fully funded summer opportunities. We're all putting resources into making sure our students have access to good networks to get jobs. And then I think there's all kinds of exciting things that are happening. We are all becoming more global in really exciting ways. Most colleges offer students a chance to go study abroad, but that's yesterday's news. In addition to that, you're just going to see all the top liberal arts colleges infuse the global throughout the curriculum in ways that big publics just aren't going to be able to. And finally, you're going to see us using technology to do things that bring our faculty in closer contact with our students. And I'll repeat what I said earlier, and I would encourage anybody who has a chance to read Dan Chambliss' new book called How College Works, where he makes the simple point that kids who go to a college where they receive good mentorship from faculty get a lot out of college. People who go to places where that doesn't happen get very little out of college. We're going to use both what we do and technology to just do that better, to make mentorship the kind of hallmark of an educational experience.
Great, thanks. Brock, Sean, you want to add anything there?
Well, I would just note that we are all undergraduate institutions, these three institutions. We are devoted exclusively on the education of the undergraduate. Our faculty choose, they're world-class scholars, they're master teachers. They choose our institutions because they want to devote the bulk of their time to teaching and to undergraduate education. That's our historic strength, and that's our future strength. And what we will see in the future is to continue to place the emphasis on the interaction between student and teacher. That interaction will take forms in the future, perhaps that it has not taken in the past. Gone are the days when that interaction is primarily a person standing behind a lectern in front of a group like this. Much more today, it's one faculty member and one student working together to design the individual program of that student, a portion of which will take place on campus, a portion of which may take place in an internship here in Columbus, and as Adam has noted, a portion of which may take place, whether it's in a volunteer experience, a cross-cultural encounter, or a semester of study abroad somewhere far removed from our campus as we prepare these global citizens.
And just the one thing I would add, and certainly I agree with both Adam and Rock on looking ahead to the future. I think the future in many ways is very bright for the types of educational opportunities that our institutions provide. In many ways, when I think of the impact of disruption on higher education overall, I actually see that the big drivers are pushing all institutions towards what our institutions have done now for centuries, which is putting undergraduate learning at the core of what we do. That's the central piece of the mission of the institution, putting an emphasis on the strong connection between faculty, mentor, and student, and the power that can happen when students have the opportunity to develop close mentoring relationships with faculty, putting an emphasis on connecting what happens in the classroom to learning a rich array of learning experiences outside of the classroom, and giving some meaning and context to those types of experiences. I think those are things that our institutions have done for some time. I think they're things that we're continuing to work to hone and develop and to make sure we are executing on those as well as we possibly can. And I think actually the larger direction is we're going to see more and more large institutions, more and more comprehensive institutions try to figure out how to do that. So I think actually in many ways, the work that we're doing is very much the future direction of higher education overall.
Thanks so much. Each of our presidents has emphasized this aspect of the close personal relationships, the mentoring that is possible to carry out in these small environments. I'll close this portion with a bizarre factoid about that. There is a recent study that shows that the greatest single factor in a student's success at college was whether that student had had dinner with the professor. You guys seen this? Yeah. Go figure. And we do that in our colleges. Now, as I said, I know that it's CMC's tradition to take audience questions. And so those of you who would like to come into this conversation, please go to a microphone. I don't know where I see, okay. Step to the microphone and please give us your name and your question. And I will say, and I'm already a stickler on this, thank you in advance for not making long editorial comments.
I will adhere to your wishes. I'm Lori Connor, class of 77 from Ohio Wesleyan University, and live in the Central Ohio area. My question involves some really big headlines that have been in the news about campus safety and also Title IX and the treatment of campus assault, possible sexual assault. I know it's a big topic, but maybe you could just share a little thoughts about that.
Yeah, it's huge, and every campus in America is dealing with it, no question. Open to the panel.
Yeah, I'll start. Look, the only acceptable amount of sexual assault on a college campus is none, never, under any circumstances, right? I mean, that's what we need to be aiming for. I think our campuses, and I think every college in the country is grappling with this issue. Here's where I'm really proud of the work that liberal arts colleges in Central Ohio, the work we're doing. I think we've all done a couple things this year that I'm really proud of. One is we've had really brutally honest conversations with our students about their need to step up and step in with us. So I'm really proud. Last night I had dinner with a group of fraternity presidents at Denison, and their goal for next year is to, at the start of the year, make the statement that Denison parties that have fraternity members at them will be the safest parties a young person ever goes to. And they're looking at everything that goes on in the course of a night to make sure that every single person at that party is safe. That's really great because this has to be a community-wide effort. The other is one of the great things about being here, and I say this as a transplant to the Midwest, having spent a lot of time in New England where things just work differently. People here are collegial. and community-minded and work together. Our campuses are actually working together right now on doing some things that are going to allow us to respond to crises quicker and more effectively, but also to be able to do prevention, I think, in a little bit smarter way. So this is actually an area that I think is huge. I think it's important. I think it's great that the spotlight is on every campus in the country, and I think it's an area where our colleges are going to really excel over the next couple of years.
I think that's no, go ahead, Rob.
Well, I would just echo what Adam has said. We're a part of a 13 college association, the Great Lakes College Association, that gathered about 200 people from our 13 campuses for 2 days in December to dig deeply into these issues. We all share the commitments that Adam has articulated. And our campuses are actually now, as a result, working together to develop some shared services for educational purposes and for ensuring that we're able to meet the objective that Adam articulated.
Great. Thank you. We have someone at the mic.
I'm Dave Williams. I'm the Dean of Engineering at Ohio State University. Many in this room may not know that an engineering education in this country is incomplete without a mandated 20 or more credits of the liberal arts and the humanities. At a time when some of the key moral and ethical issues facing our nation are driven by advances in engineering, should a liberal arts education likewise be considered incomplete without 20 or more credits of fundamentals of engineering?
Great question.
Well, and I think that we are at an important cultural moment where an understanding of science, technology, engineering, mathematics is absolutely essential for citizenship. And I think if you look at all of our campuses, a role of the STEM fields as part of the requirements of all students is something that's important. And I think that it's not just from the angle of having a sort of baseline knowledge of science that's essential, but I think it's also understanding what the practice of science and engineering is about that's important. What underlies the decision making, what underlies the thinking and analysis behind science, what it means to actually build something. I think one of the neat classes that we've had at Kenyon over the course of the past few years is a class that's not an engineering class, but it's engineering flavored, that's offered in physics. That's a class on gadgets, and it's aimed for the non-expert scientist, but for general students to have a sense of what it's like to design and build something. And I think it's arising from exactly that desire to make sure that all of the students have a sense of what that's about, and that's really something that's essential to understand how society works and is moving ahead.
Yeah, if I can take on that one for a second, David, great question. I think, related to what Sean just said, I think what we're going to see is engineering maybe coming in originally a little bit through the back door, but engineering via design. There's such an enormous interest in design today, and everything from designing a gadget to urban design and so forth. And I think that's one way that we're going to see those fields kind of blur. There are also a number of campuses that are thinking very seriously now about whether programming or app building should be considered a language in the way that we include languages in our requirements. So, next question.
I'm Vinita Mehra from the law firm of Kegler Brown. You spoke a little bit about globalization. We know globalization of education is happening. What are each one of you all doing to see how that impacts a liberal arts school in the U.S.? And what are you doing to adapt to that so that there's a success in these liberal arts schools becoming global?
So glad you asked that. And I'll keep it short. So I think what you are seeing top liberal arts colleges already do is something that large public institutions have a hard time doing, which is infusing the global in absolutely everything we do. So first and foremost, we have growing international populations on our campus, but not only do we have growing international populations on our campus, we're doing something really neat. They're actually interacting with U.S. students. There was a study done a year ago that found that the average student from Asia who spends time on a U.S. college campus goes back to their home country having made 0 U.S. friends. We can't live in that world. And so each of our campuses are doing an amazing job making sure international students are infused throughout the campus. Second is, on all of our campuses, close to 60% of our students are having a study abroad experience. So one of their 8 semesters is actually spent abroad, but it's spent abroad on a high-quality academic program that has deep cultural immersion. The third is, as I mentioned earlier, because we are now part of an alliance of the top liberal arts colleges globally, we are now doing everything from linking classes, so students are doing joint projects together globally, to courses being co-taught across national boundaries, to, as Grant mentioned, joint conferences. We are planning a joint leadership conference that will probably take place in Greece that will bring our students together with students from 14 other countries. So just everything we're doing has become global. From my perspective, that's going to be one of the real distinguishing features of somebody who goes to a private liberal arts college. They're going to be able to graduate and really talk in real specificity about their ability to adapt to a global world. From my very humble perspective, if you graduate from college and you can you can work with people who are different from yourself, you can write, and you have a good work ethic, you just separated yourself from about 95% of the people out there.
Just one other aspect of the Global Liberal Arts Alliance, there is actually a globalization studies program that is emerging among the 13 Midwestern colleges and the 14 international partners, and students will enroll in the program from their home campus. They'll take courses using technology from campuses around the world. They'll have the opportunity, if they choose, to travel to those campuses, but a globalization studies program that we share within that consortium will be an important part of each of our campuses.
Great. I think we maybe have time for 2 more questions.
I'm John Lowe. I worked in universities for about 40 years, from Central Arkansas to Chicago. And one of the biggest changes I saw was the great increase in non-traditional students. The average age of students at one place I worked was 34, for example. It was older than the faculty. But I'm wondering what's happened and what do you predict will happen with non-traditional students at your schools?
So our schools tend to attract primarily traditional age students. The vast majority of students on our campus, I think on all of our campuses, are 18 to 23-year-olds just out of high school. Some have had a gap year or 2, and actually some of those students have had really extraordinary experiences that enrich the campus when they arrive. But it's clear that higher education as a whole is serving a much broader range of the population, including a broader age range. And that's something that we'll, I'm sure, be needing to consider. But as residential undergraduate liberal arts campuses, we're among that relatively small number of schools that I think will be primarily focused on the traditional student, at least in the near term.
Yeah, in this regard, I'd say there is a variation across the sector. So these colleges do tend to be the traditional age, but we've seen a lot of other things happening. We are seeing more returning veterans in some of the small liberal arts colleges, and some colleges have kind of reinvented themselves. I'm sure many of you read about the closing of Sweetbriar College and a kind of lament of women's colleges are a thing of the past and so forth and so on. A decade or more ago, a number of those types of colleges reinvented themselves and became schools for a non-traditional, older, often inner-city population with great success. So I think you see a lot of different forms across the small liberal arts sector. And last question, please.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Franklin Conaway. I'm a graduate of Ohio Wesleyan University a few years ago. I want to just briefly bring up a subject that I think is missing in the American educational system from the top down and from the bottom up. And it's going to sound like a very big subject when I mention beauty and aesthetics. However, I think it has everything to do with the well-being of the people in this country and everywhere. In fact, in recent years, we have more and more studies that clearly indicate the connection between our mental health and the lack of or the existence of a high quality of physical environment, which manifests the quality of the life of any country. I have spent many years working not just in Ohio, but around the country in the field of urban redevelopment, historic preservation, and transportation planning. And I cannot tell you the frustration I run into every day in trying to save buildings that should never be lost, that have everything to do with teaching our young people about their cultural heritage and honoring that heritage, regardless of the diverse backgrounds that they may come from. It's owned by everyone. European students learn from a very young age the significance of their architectural heritage, and they can identify every period of time in the history of their nation by the architecture that they're looking at. If you think for a moment where we go for vacation, whether it's a beach with palm
Andy
trees.
doesn't pull me off the stage.
I'm finishing up.
I'm going to send this over to these beautiful campuses.
Thank you. I just want to suggest that this subject needs to be addressed on a higher level, and perhaps it belongs in our liberal arts colleges here in Ohio. A good beginning could, and we will be very happy to talk to you with our team about how we could do this. Thank you.
And each of our colleges has requirements that our students study in the arts field, I think, right?
And I would say just very quickly on that it's not only would you find on each of our campuses requirements in the fine arts, which I think are aimed to get at some of those concepts of appreciation of aesthetics and understanding of aesthetics that to which you're referring, but also it's increasingly common at our colleges to aim to infuse arts throughout the curriculum in a range of different ways. And so, for example, at Kenyon, our art gallery on campus not only has programs that are aimed at the art history students or visual art, studio art students, but rather aims to incorporate visual arts into courses in the natural sciences, into courses in history, into courses in politics, with the idea that just in the same way that understanding and being able to use scientific concepts and scientific ideas broadly across the curriculum in understanding society, that it's important to have an appreciation of visual art material culture and to be able to use the language of visual art material culture not just in art history but in chemistry, in biology, in politics. So I think that at many of our campuses, I think the institutions here and I think other liberal arts colleges, you would find that there is a move in that direction that you're referring.
I would say that we both talk the talk and walk the walk. Each of us has a historic campus, and we invest significant resources in preserving those campuses. If you were to look at our calendars over the month of April, I suspect each of us have the real joy of many evenings in this month hearing orchestras, choruses, seeing theater productions, attending senior fine arts presentations, and we see not only students who are majoring in those disciplines, but students from across the campus who, as a part of their undergraduate experience, are taking full advantage of the artistic opportunities, and they'll carry those experiences with them throughout life.
I think that's right. I want to add one other piece. You also talked about wellness. That shouldn't go lost. I actually think we have a huge wellness issue with the generation of young people who are stressed out, they're plugged in too much, they haven't had enough experience kind of learning to build relationships. I think, look, given how long one lives, the other thing we don't talk enough about with the college experience is it's 4 years of your life. So it's probably 6% of your life. It should be a wonderful 6 years. And one of the great things about all of our campuses is you spend 6 years on a beautiful campus surrounded by aesthetics with faculty who know your name. 4 years. With faculty who know your name.
Opportunity cost.
Yeah. We'll take them for 6, though.
No, that's what Ohio State does. Excellent.
But I think that's the other part of it is I think when you spend time on a private residential liberal arts campus, it's a very different way to live. And I think for a lot of our students, they come out with better life habits around wellness, aesthetics, a more relational approach to life that will serve them well, not just in their professional life, but also in their personal life, just building healthy, meaningful lives.
Thank you so much for your interest and for being here. And I especially want to thank our panelists. One more question? I thought you were going to cut me right off there, Andy. Okay. Sure, go ahead.
Thank you for squeezing me in. Bill Faust with Ology, and a quick question. So much of what you talked about today is about perception, changing perceptions or misperceptions about cost, about curriculum, about employability. Who owns that problem? Who owns the challenge of changing perceptions? And with all the communication channels that we now have at our disposal, why is it so hard to change the public perception of the liberal arts?
So since you do work for Denison, I'm hoping you own that problem.
Yeah.
You told me you were going to fix this by Friday. So, look, who owns it in all honesty? We own it. College presidents own it. We've been way too silent. And partially we've been silent because our colleges have been thriving. They've been doing well. Many of you knew Dale Noble, my predecessor, and I will forever be grateful to Dale. I took over a college. It was really healthy. Sean did the same, Rock did the same. So I think because we were thriving, we were too slow to realize that the public narrative was changing. And now we're behind it, and we just need to get out with the facts. And we need to do a better job helping our alumni and parents understand. We need to do a better job working with firms like yours. And college presidents need to step up and be a little bit more forceful as public figures, talking about the state of higher ed, what's going well, where we need to adjust, but also recognizing that from my perspective, having worked globally for 8 years, among the things this country should be proud of is we still remain the leader globally in having the best higher ed sector.
And maybe the one other thing I would add to that is that this larger conversation that we're having now in the U.S. about the value of the liberal arts and the role of higher education in general is not at all a new discussion. And in fact, if you go back and look through time, it's actually a kind of fun exercise to go through and look at various points in time of articles in Time Magazine and Newsweek and the New York Times, and at periods of economic turmoil, you will find many, many doomsday articles that say that the liberal arts are doomed. And then what's amazing is that often spinning around on a dime 9 months later, you'll find articles that will say, no, actually liberal arts are a core foundation to the future. And so I think that, to some extent, this historically has been a source of tension, dialogue, discussion within the U.S. that goes back, as far as the 50s, if not further. And so on the one hand, I think this is something that we all collectively need to own, and we need to be as vocal in taking active roles in this dialogue, this conversation. But I also think it's something that is going to continue to evolve and emerge over time, and that's the way it has happened over history.
I have to redeem myself from having dissed the publics. So I'll say with Sean, it goes back much further in American history. And actually the emergence, the origin of the great state universities was in the 1860s when the controversy was very much the same. Do we just need to train people for agriculture and engineering? Do we just need to train people in classical languages? That was why we created the great state universities, was to begin to evolve education. So it's been around forever. And I was asked, knowing my background, I was asked, will I talk about Plato? Yes, Plato had the same problem.
Well, thank you all. I think we've got 4 pretty good champions of liberal arts education, and we all learned a little bit today as well. I'm sure you enjoyed the program. I certainly did. We encourage you to continue the conversation with these fellows and ladies in the lobby with coffee and cookies. Remember that you can view and share all of our forums on CTV Columbus Television, on WOSU, and PBS affiliates statewide through the Ohio Channel, and anytime on CMC's website. Before we conclude, please help me thank all of our sponsors again, the Columbus Foundation, Crabb Brown, James, State Auto, thank you so much, and our speakers, Rock James, Sean Decatur, Adam Weinberg, and Georgia Nugent. Thank you so much. Please come back soon.